This episode of Wheat Pete's Word is brought to you by Syngenta. With Syngenta, you can count on quality support that's tailored to meet your goals. Their experts are available online, over the phone, and in person to offer agronomic advice and help you find the best solutions to your challenges. Every interaction is with a qualified Syngenta employee committed to your operations' growth and success.
Good day, and welcome to Wheat Pete's Word here on Real Agriculture for Wednesday, December the 10th. On this episode of the Word, smile. It has so much power. Oh, snow, gosh, snow. Manure. Oh, here we go again. Manure on snow. Plot results and nitrogen fixing wheat at the end of the episode. Let's go. Yes, so I'm in another play. Yeehaw! If you're looking for something to do, a good chuckle. The Ingersoll Theatre of Performing Arts, also known as ITOPA, we open this Friday. It's called Inspecting Carol. It's absolutely hilarious, but rehearsals have been a struggle to get actors there, and we haven't had enough time, and it's going to be a great show, but sitting backstage, and it had been a bit of a tough rehearsal, trying to remember lines and positioning and just waiting to go on again, and looked across and some other actors across the room and one young girl in particular. And when I looked over towards them, she just smiled at me. And oh my gosh, I just felt so much better because of that smile. And I can't tell you how many different times I've been reminded of this, or how many different times this has impacted me. But if you see someone smile, it brightens your day 100%. And if you're walking around, it's just so easy not to smile because you're thinking about 27 million things and gosh, there's so much to do. And oh my good, no, just think about it. Stop. Smile at someone that you're walking past. You will brighten their day. And by the way, it'll make your day as well. So the power of a smile is really quite incredible. And then we move to the weather here in Ontario. And as I record Wheat Pete's Word, it is snowing again, and it looks like the winter of 2025-2026 may well be like last winter, which is a real winter. It started early. We have shoveled snow, I think, 5 times now, and it is December the 10th. That doesn't bode well. And as we kind of whine and complain about schools being closed and buses and everything, I'm looking through my Twitter feed, and there's my good friend Kevin from Chilliwack, BC, saying, oh boy, 5 to 6 inches of rain. So remember, in 2021, they had that atmospheric river that they had the whole valleys flooded out, and they had to move cows out, and like it was a nightmare. It's the exact same thing as setting up for, actually, this time aimed at Washington. It looks like southern BC may be on the northern edge of it, but who knows where it will hit or if it will be that bad at the end of the day. 6 inches of snow, what the heck? We just go out and shovel and blow and push and drive slowly, and life will be good. Way better than 6 inches of rain. I'm pretty sure of that. All right, I want to move on, and I want to talk about yields because some really, really cool stuff here. Not all of it good, but some of it great. Michigan had their highest ever wheat yield. So just like Ontario, Ontario finally broke 100 bushels per acre. Michigan, a 90 bushel per acre average wheat crop. Michigan has really, really come to the table in terms of managing wheat. And I do think a lot of it is the Great Lakes Yen program. Registration is open right now. I encourage you to consider it. It just makes your wheat management that much better. And whether it's the Maritimes, their wheat yields have improved significantly. Michigan's on a real good uptrend right now. Ontario, we're still trying to lead the pack, but the focus on management really does make a difference. In fact, Michigan this year was the number 2 wheat yield state in all of the United States, second only to Idaho, and of course some irrigated wheat that beat them as well. But kudos to them, and kudos to just focusing on management, because wheat responds to management. And then we come back to Ontario, and some early yields starting to be reported on corn and soybeans here in the province of Ontario. Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, and these are not finalized yields, so please don't hold me to them, but the provincial average corn yield looking like 99% of our 10-year average. And so basically it's an average year. And then you look at some of the drought-affected areas in central Ontario, Lennox, Addington, at 37% of normal 10-year average corn yields. Their average corn yield to date, 56 bushels per acre. Ouch! With soybeans provincially 93%, so that the dry weather in August hurt soybeans more than corn. Makes sense. Again, Lennox and Addington, 41% of an average yield of 17 bushels per acre. 17 bushel soybeans and 56 bushel corn. And you just go, oh. But the upside there, yep, in winter wheat at 108% of average. So at least one crop was above average. But yes, to get a provincial average that is basically 100%, and you have some areas at 37%. It wasn't the only one. There was some at 40%, some at 58%. So that means where corn was good, there must be some really good yields too. And I haven't seen those numbers yet, but wow, definitely no equity in the province of Ontario this year. All right, I'll move on. And I talked last week about Peter Heinrich and his statement about patience. And so my good friend Ken Nixon from Ilderton, Ken was at a meeting with me and he said, Peter, I want to give you the exact quote because I was in the room that day and it was so profound that it has stuck with me all of these years. And the quote is, patience is the least expensive piece of tillage equipment I have to own and operate, but the most difficult one to manage. And Ken said, man, that quote was worth the price of the conference right there. And I got a great email from Kevin down in Essex County saying, Peter, that note on patience, that is probably the best piece of advice or wisdom that you have given in all of 2025 on your word episodes, particularly on the heavy clay soils. Kevin says that they are tile draining some of that heavy clay as close as 10-foot centers. But his comment was, no amount of tile fixes going out on clay soils too early. And absolutely, it is just one of those things. And, it's people like Peter, like Wheat Pete, who says, plant early, plant early, plant early. And you want to plant early and you go too early and you don't have enough patience and it actually can bite you big time. So there's both sides of that coin. Stuart saying, hey, Peter, just on the whole tillage aspect thing, man, we do as little tillage as possible. Typically, the RTS, if it's a dry fall, we RTS our corn stalks in the fall, and that works beautifully. That seems to work the best. That just disappears. And so this goes back to this Bill Litwin discussion, getting that residue in contact with the soil and getting enough warm temperatures and moist conditions to get breakdown on that residue. But Stuart says, man, if it's a wet fall, we leave the RTS in the shed and we do it in the spring. It isn't as good, but it's still better if you wait to do it on dry soil than as if you go through in the fall just making mud balls. So absolutely great advice and a good discussion. The other question that Stuart asked me, though, was, so Peter, when it comes to residue, is it true that if you get a straight cut in that residue, that doesn't speed breakdown as much as if you get a jagged cut or you can tear those stalks apart? And so, Stuart, it's 100% surface area. You want bacteria to get at that residue, The more surface area you expose, the more surface area you can get in contact with the soil when we have warm temperatures, when we have moisture, the more they're going to break it down because they can get at it. So a straight cut is not going to give you nearly as much surface area as if you tear that or you get a nice jagged edge. You're going to have lots more surface area. So yeah, that's absolutely true. That a straight cut is not going to do as much as if we can get a jagged cut through that residue and encourage more of those bacteria. All right, I want to move on because manure on snow, and as soon as it snows and we still have manure in the tank, gosh, we got to get out there and spread manure on the snow. And you're all going to say, yeah, and Pete's going to get on his pedestal and he is going to pound the pulpit and he's going to say, no manure on snow. And you're right. But this particular go-round has been really interesting because I had 3 different people contact me to say, Peter, like, I don't think I can make it till spring. And I do not want to go out there and spread manure on snow and be the focus of social media attention where this is just wrong. If I chase the manure spreader with the disc ripper, I just chase it. Is that an acceptable practice? And another grower saying, what about if I moldboard plow it? Is that an acceptable practice? And so back up 2 steps and just think, okay, so what is the problem with manure on snow? And the problem with manure on snow is that when it melts, that melt water takes the manure where we don't want it to go. So if you are early in the fall and the snow isn't deep and you can get the manure on and immediately incorporate it into the soil, you do open the soil up to some soil erosion issues. Of course, if it snows immediately, that'll go away for a little bit of time. But if you get that manure into the soil, it would be exactly the same as going out into that field with 3 inches of snow with an injector and injecting that manure into the soil. And what is the problem with that? And the answer is not very much. So yes, if you can incorporate immediately, I think we can get away with manure on snow. The problem is that the snow soon gets too deep and it's not fit to plow or do whatever tillage you're going to do behind that manure application. And now it's sitting on snow, and that is 100% bad. Hey, the one other quick note before I leave manure, and this is a great learning opportunity, but don't do it just for the purposes of doing it. I had another grower leave a voicemail message in the system attached to the word saying, okay, Peter, I know you say no manure on snow, but I did it. And man, I want you to tell people that the spread pattern on these liquid manure spreaders, or for that matter on any manure spreader, you think you're doing a good job. Go do it on snow, because you are just going to say, oh, that is ugly. And I think you're 100% right. If you do spread it on snow, it's going to show, and it's going to show just how variable manure application is. And it's one of the reasons why when we talk about nitrogen out of manure, it's so hard to predict, because we don't get a 28% applicator putting, a stream down every 7 inches into my wheat crop and 100% uniformity. Manure is far from that, and I don't know if the best we can expect is 50%, but it's not good. So that is one way to tell just how poor your spread pattern actually is. But if you're going to do it, look at it, say, this is awful, we got to fix it, and then plow it. Dang it, well, or at least get it incorporated. Plow is always this, Anyway, it's all good. All right, I'm going to move on and talk about plots. So first off, Paul, you left me a message, and you said, you talked or sent a previous message about blackstrap molasses. You got to love that name, blackstrap molasses, sugar and kelp, and how when you put that on, you had no bug problems. Well, I didn't hear that message, so we need to talk further. And I've heard this before. There's no research science to back it up, but I'll take your experience. And I think about it, and I'm thinking, well, what self-respecting insect would want to land on a leaf where you had molasses and get its feet stuck there and smell kelp? It's just okay. I don't know. In any case, I'm not saying it's real, but we do need to chat about that. But the other thing that Paul left me was, and he just shook his head at this. He is not happy about this because everybody loves Y dropping nitrogen because it's fast and it's simple and you can cover acres, and most of the time it can work just fine. This year, Paul did a comparison plot. They injected with a 12-row applicator, I believe it was. They Y dropped right beside it. They did a 1-acre plot each side of the divide. And wow, on a dry year with no rain after the Y dropping, there was a 1.36 ton per acre yield increase in corn to getting that nitrogen in the ground where the corn could utilize it. If you're not a ton per acre person, that is 52 bushels per acre. That is a huge yield difference. But if you the corn crop needs nitrogen when the corn crop needs nitrogen, and if that nitrogen is sitting on top of the ground, and we have seen this before, then it's positionally unavailable and you can definitely have negative impacts. Meanwhile, Gerard sending a very nice plot where he had 0, 30, 60 side dressed onto a cornfield where he had applied 3 tons per acre of biofertilizer pellets the previous fall. And now Gerard is in Bruce County. They had excellent moisture this year. It was a bit of a short growing season, so they had a lot of high moisture corn, but they had great growing conditions all season long. They didn't go dry the way most of us did. And guess what? There's zero response to that side dress nitrogen. Oh, you could argue that numerically there was a 7 bushel yield advantage to 30 pounds of nitrogen, but 7 bushels, yeah, by the time you side dress it, it wasn't economical, and certainly 60 pounds of nitrogen had a lower yield increase than the 30 pounds of nitrogen. So when organic sources work, whether it's manure or it's biofertilizer, they work. The trick is to be able to measure them and know when they're coming to the table. And so this whole concept of cycling, that manure cycling, the biopellet cycling, if you're dry, you're not going to see as much. If you get perfect weather, you are absolutely going to see as much. And on that note, Kevin in Essex saying that their nitrogen use efficiency on corn this year was as low as 0.68 pounds per bushel. So they had well above normal yields in corn on normal nitrogen applications, which ends up being essentially 0.7 of a pound of nitrogen to produce a bushel of corn. And that's what happens when you get those perfect conditions. The soil bacteria, the soil bugs just work on that organic matter. They've got the right temperatures, they've got the right moisture, and you're thinking, oh, I've got this big, huge crop coming. I should have put on more nitrogen. No, the soil bugs do it for you, and they generate that nitrogen, and life is good. So oftentimes we get much better results under those good growing conditions than we might expect. And that part of that is definitely that nutrient cycling. Okay, John sending me a message. Peter, my pH is 7.5. I know it should be 6.5. How do I reduce it? Do I put on sulfur? Wait, John, no. You're still in the sweet spot, man. Anywhere, realistically, if you are between 6 and 7.8, you really don't need to worry about your pH very much. Oh, when you get low or if you get high, you might have to apply a little more phosphorus because your phosphorus can get tied up. But the sweet spot really is kind of that 6.2 to 7.5 for most crops. You're at 7.5. Don't try to drop that pH. In fact, over time, if we continue to use nitrogen fertilizers, that almost for sure that pH will start coming down anyway, unless, of course, you're getting soil erosion, because in your part of the world, your subsoil is a pH of 8.2, and if you're bringing that subsoil up and mixing it with the topsoil, then your pH may continue to go up. So there's another reason to do appropriate tillage. Hey, Robert saying, Peter, I soil sampled and I can't understand it. My potassium levels have just dropped, and I've been applying much above removal net levels. How is that possible? Well, Robert, you were in one of those super dry areas, and as I've talked about before, when you're in a super dry area, and a clay soil in particular, those clays collapse around that potash, make it unavailable, and it doesn't show up on the soil test. So retest. By the way, on a couple of his fields, Robert's pH has also dropped. Again, that is a drought phenomenon, and very unlikely that you need to go out there and lime those acres quite yet. Resample, now that you've got some moisture, that will tell you for sure. Last, before I get into nitrogen-fixing wheat, a nice research paper by Brian Arnall out of Oklahoma State University. And, I get pushed on fall nitrogen on wheat all the time. And I sometimes say, well, if you're in an area where they've got more growth in the fall, maybe some nitrogen in the fall makes sense. Well, guess what? Brian's research, Oklahoma, that's a warm area, right? It's quite far south. 3-year study, 0 benefit to fall nitrogen on wheat for grain. On wheat that they're going to pasture, they do or dual purpose pasture, and then take it to grain, there's a reason for fall nitrogen. On wheat for grain, 0 benefit to fall nitrogen. And that just supports what I've said for years and years. No fall nitrogen on wheat. You just lose half of it. Why would you do that? All right, enough. I'll move on past the pulpit. And I want to finish up with nitrogen fixing wheat. So this is such a cool story. And by the way, it may not work in the field because all of this comes from laboratory analysis, but it is neat. So Eduardo Blumwald from University of California, Davis have gene-edited wheat so that it will create the situation in the soil so that nitrogen-fixing bacteria will actually fix nitrogen for the wheat plant. Now, the way this works is there is nitrogen-fixing bacteria in the soil everywhere. They're ubiquitous. They just exist. But most of the time, the nitrogen in the soil is too high, and so those bacteria don't create nitrogenase. It's an enzyme, so they don't make that enzyme. We don't fix any nitrogen. And certainly we grow a grass crop, man, we got to power the nitrogen to it. Corn, wheat, barley, oats, whatever, to get that yield out of it. Therein lies the challenge. So a legume, of course, the rhizobium with soybeans, it infects the root, and there's a symbiosis there. That process works. And people have tried to do that with grass crops. It just doesn't work. So what Eduardo has done is he has gene-edited wheat. What they did was they looked at a whole bunch of different compounds that would create low nitrogen environments in the soil. And they found I think they tested some 15,000 or some crazy number. They found 20. And out of that 20, there was one that the wheat plant produces genetically. It's in its makeup to produce the flavone called apigenin. And what they did through CRISPR technology, so that's gene editing, they went in and they created a wheat that increased its amount of apigenin significantly. The apigenin, this flavone, it creates a biofilm right around the root. So we just get this film of the flavone around that root, kind of a sheath there. But that is a low nitrogen microenvironment. And when it's a low nitrogen microenvironment, the nitrogen-fixing bacteria that are within that environment they produce nitrogenase enzyme, and the nitrogenase enzyme fixes nitrogen out of the soil air and gives it to the wheat crop. And they have been very successful in producing basically enough nitrogen to grow the entire wheat crop. So if this works, and this is a huge if, remember, 90% of what works in the lab does not work in the field because there's so many competing bugs out in the field and so many different variables. But if this works, this could be very cool. They're working on it to see if they can make it work in corn. How much it costs the plant to do that is another question. But wow, incredibly cool stuff and a different approach to how we can solve cereal crops making their own nitrogen. Very, very cool stuff. And with that, that's it. That's all on behalf of the team here at Real Agriculture. This is Wheat Pete with a very long word for Wednesday, the 10th of December. Hey, questions, comments, topics to talk about. It's wintertime, so we're always wondering what you want to hear about. Let us know that, and we will be back next week and talk too long yet again. See you then.
Thank you for downloading this episode of Wheat Pete's Word, brought to you by Syngenta. Syngenta proudly offers qualified representatives who are ready to help your operation with tailored agronomic advice. Your Syngenta team wishes you a restful holiday break with family and looks forward to seeing you at a trade show this winter. Be sure to stop by the booth at CPS, Manitoba Ag Days, Ag Expo, or the Ontario Southwest Agriculture Conference.